Greetings and salutations. Quick shout out to the two Uber comrades supporting my channel in this content picture. My partner, thank you, Rissa, and
me.
Independent Left News. Not her. She's great, but she's not an Uber comrade. So came across this pretty interesting article at the Gray Zone. I'll link in the description box down below about Bill Gates and just some of the more messed up things he's doing around the globe. And if you actually have any history of Bill Gates, the Gates Foundation in particular, they're engaged in some really shady stuff, in the global south in particular. And definitely not somebody that we should be, lionizing as some positive figure in the world, because all, Gates and his foundation and other, wealthy people like that, just spreading things to benefit themselves. And I mean, there's a reason that he's more wealthy and powerful now than when he actually stopped, working at, Microsoft. So here we go. How big corporations and Bill Gates took over the UN Food Summit. And that is obviously not a good thing. This is from Niels McCune and Camila Escalante. Large corporations and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation took over the United Nations Food System Summit, abandoning small farmers in favor of big ag companies, endangering food sovereignty. Again, Bill Gates is a huge proponent of GMOs, genetically modified organisms, basically patenting life, patenting seeds, etc. Vandana Shiva has, done a lot of great work on why GMOs are so harmful. I highly recommend checking that out. He's also the biggest farmland owner in the United States. This September 23rd, so this just happened under the guise of the UN system, and despite sleight of hand language about equal opportunities, the summit represents a hostile takeover of world governance by corporate forces and the billionaire elite, like Bill Gates, right? Today's social movements are standing up for democracy against big capital's devastation of their lands, farms, and communities. But Bill Gates and his foundation, they want to keep, expediting that very harmful process. For, again, this type of behavior and action impacts the most vulnerable, marginalized people. United Nations is based on the idea of multilateralism, where states seek peaceful solutions on the basis of equality and respect, replacing the colonialist institutions that preceded it. That's why for decades, the United States government has insisted for things like the G7, NATO, and other forms of control over geopolitics. As far-right governments have pulled back from multilateral institutions like the UN and WHO, corporate actors have been moving in. The World Economic Forum and its president, Klaus Schwab, have silently pushed forward the Davos agenda, now repackaged as the Great Reset, a vast proposal replacing traditional multilateral institutions with secretive, unaccountable bodies run by corporations and the wealthy elite. The multi-stakeholder capitalism model is based on the idea that public institutions are by nature inefficient. During the neoliberal shock therapy of the 1990s, the World Economic Forum pushed the idea that corporations more than just profit-seeking vehicles, that they could be like the whole, ethical capitalism, or like all of that fucking, nonsense, right? Now, Davos would argue that transnational corporations are social actors which need to be included to make decision-making truly democratic. I mean, you got to be really drunk on this capitalist Kool-Aid to believe this dog shit, right? In doing so, Davos hijacked the gains of decades of work by popular movements to open up world governance to the demands of civil society, and did so using corporate doublespeak to further entrench elite power. Gumboat philanthropy. La Viva Campesina is possibly the world's largest social movement, made up of 200 million small farmers, peasant farmers, and indigenous peoples, has popularized the idea of food sovereignty as the right of people to control and defend their own food systems using healthier ecological methods. Super important, being food sovereign, countries, communities being able to grow their own food, doing it in, sustainable ways, kind of important, right? After years battling against free trade agreements and the World Bank in the streets of Seattle as 1999, 2000, Cancun, Seoul, La Viva Campesina made an incursion to institutional politics, helping draft and carry the UN Declaration of Rights of peasants through 18 years of negotiations until it was passed by the UN General Assembly in December 2018. This declaration protects the right of rural people to access land, water, seeds, and other resources in order to produce their own food and that of society. Worldwide, 70% of food is produced by small farmers who use only 1/4 of the total farmland. So again, like there's no solution from big ag, big business, these, monopolistic growing practices like we have to a large extent, in the United States, which are heavily reliant on all of these chemical inputs, highly destructive to the soil health and biology, just pumping this food, the ground, the soil, the environment, full of chemicals, pesticides, herbicides, because they're doing it in a very unsustainable manner, and that messes up the whole kind of ecosystem. And as a result, they got to put in all these nasty, harmful inputs. While you do it on, a small scale, growing, multiple things, taking care of, the soil biology, you don't need to do that. You can do it naturally. You can do it with these, organic, sustainable inputs. Meanwhile, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation created the Alliance for Green Revolution Africa, or AGR, in 2006. AGRA promised to double yields and incomes of 30 million families while cutting food insecurity by half in 13 African countries by 2020. Over the ensuing decade, AGRA collected nearly $1 billion in donations and spent $524 million on programs promoting the use of genetically modified hybrid seeds. There we go. Again, Gates, his foundation, AGRA, huge proponents of GMOs. GMOs are hugely, hugely harmful. Commercial fossil fuel-based fertilizers, again, not sustainable at all, right? We want to be using natural inputs, whether that's, compost, cover crops, animal manures, etc., and chemical pesticides. Obviously, that's also very horrible. As a formidable corporate lobby, AGRA pushed governments in Africa into contributing another $1 billion annually to subsidize agrochemicals and imported seeds sourced from U.S. and European agribusiness corps, as policies to privatize communal lands. Not good, right? Land back. And reduce taxes on corporations. After 14 years, again, this AGRA was created in 2006, right? A mega philanthropy's knee on the neck of Africa. A 2020 Tufts University study showed that in AGRA's 13 focus countries, hunger had jumped 30%. As farmers were pushed to abandon nutritious traditional polycultures, again, what I was talking about, diversity and what growing, super important. Look, to focus on monoculture fields of imported corn seed. Opposition to AGRA's corporate takeover of the African countryside is part of what drove La Viva Campesina and farmers across the continent to demand a place at the table in the UN debates about food. After the World Food Crisis of 2008, the UN Committee on World Food Security is recognized to allow social actors such as La Viva Campesina to participate as non-voting delegates in debates about food policy. 3 consecutive UN special rapporteurs on the right to food have largely endorsed La Viva Campesina's proposals. Redistribution, land reform, and agroecological farming can end hunger while dramatically reducing agriculture's contributions to problems like greenhouse gas accumulation in the atmosphere, pollinator population decline, and freshwater scarcity. But again, the AGRA, Gates, his foundation are the complete antithesis of these, really, important steps that need to be taken. UN Public-Private Partnership, the new UN. In June 2019, the Office of UN General Secretary Antonio Guterres, without previous discussion in the General Assembly or any other intergovernmental process, signed a strategic partnership with the World Economic Forum. It's not good. Secretary General is supposed to be the world's leading advocate for multilateralism. The idea is at the core of the UN. Instead, he has effectively endorsed multi-stakeholderism, the core idea of the Great Reset. The 2021 UN Food System Summit was initiated through a partnership with the World Economic Forum with limited participation of other UN bodies such as the Food and Agriculture Org or the Committee on World Food Security, which traditionally handle food policies. In contrast to previous summits, there is no intergovernmental body that convened the summit. The current president of AGRA, Agnes Kalibata, was named a special envoy to the summit, clear sign of the hand of the Gates Foundation. The lack of transparency and corporate agenda of the summit were denounced in an open letter signed by more than 500 civil society orgs in March of 2020. Summit seeks to erase the last 15 years of progress in recognizing human rights and food systems. Again, something that Gates, AGRA, his foundation are completely against. Instead, promotes false solutions like zero net emissions, soil carbon pricing, New Deal for nature, and a practice put more control over land, biodiversity, and water in the hands of elite and secretive bodies run by corporations. So again, none of this, frankly, super surprising. Bill Gates, his foundation, AGRA, pushing these hugely disruptive, disastrous policies that only benefit, his wealthy kind of corporate cronies, etc. And I mean, there's also another article I'll just show, briefly, and I'll link this down below. It's a long one, so I'm not going to go over it today. I've made a separate video on it in the past, and this one's titled "Why the Bill Gates Global Health Empire Promises More Empire and Less Public Health." Really interesting and super important article by Michelle Greenstein and Jeremy Lafredo. This is back in June of 2020. So, they got, the Gates Foundation, 51 billion in assets end of 2019. He's, all these outlets look at this as some, expert, public health expert, even though he has no training whatsoever in public health. He's not an epidemiologist, etc. And then, he's in the Gates Foundation. Just look at this. That's fucking disgusting, right? Like, what in the fuck? Like, white savior complex to infinity, right? Second richest person on earth. Let's see. Yep. Gates Foundation functions as a Trojan horse for Western corporations. I mean, the Gates Foundation has been pushing these, these vaccines, these medicines that have been, more or less outlawed for use in the United States and these other, countries because of their disastrous consequences. And the Gates Foundation has been pushing these off onto the global South, right? The revolving door between the Gates Foundation and Big Pharma. The CEO of the Bill and Melinda Gates Medical Research Institute, Penny Heaton, hails from drug kingpin Merck and Novartis. The revolving door between Big Pharma and the Gates Foundation, it's pretty widespread. So look, they want to work with big pharma. Gates buys the WHO. Let's see. But the money to the WHO comes with strings attached. Second largest contributor to the WHO in 2018 was the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Let's see. Yeah, here we go. Okay, I just want to get to this last piece, and then
what happened?
What?
What's happening with Bill Gates? Wait, is that okay?
Yeah, that's Bill Gates. He's not a very good person, in my opinion. He does a lot of really messed up things, and he's able to get away with it because he's very wealthy and powerful, and his image has basically been whitewashed from the media as he's some, philanthropist just creating good in the world, when he does the complete opposite, in my opinion.
That's very messed up.
Agreed. And look at that. The Guardian is supported by their foundation. They've donated millions to major media outlets: NPR, PBS, ABC, BBC, Al Jazeera, Daily Telegraph, Financial Times. Deadly double standards. We see equal value in all lives. The foundation appears to see the global South as a dumping. This is what I was talking about. As a dumping ground for drugs deemed too unsafe for the developed world, and a testing ground for drugs not yet determined to be safe enough for the developed world. It's just fucking disgusting, right? Okay, so I'm going to link this down below, but definitely worth reading. Again, this, AGRA, and the Gates Foundation being behind that, not super surprising. And, they're pushing GMOs and chemical fertilizers and wanting to privatize land, the exact opposite of what we, should be advocating for, but it's not It's not surprising, unfortunately. Like the video if you like that video. Subscribe for more content. All part of the people. Peace. Much love.